Welcome back along to the Carp Chronicles podcast, episode number 74, and Paul Martin returns. Paul Martin, who did the BCSG book on bait, has come back and is talking about his own experience with bait. His dad had a bait company many years ago. It's no longer running as far as I'm aware. So Paul has been in the bait game for a long time and he's seen behind the curtain since an early age. So he's back to share his experience and findings with bait. So I hope you enjoy it. A lot of people enjoyed the BCSG podcast. I think Paul's probably quite easy to listen to, quite relaxing, dulcet tones, and I got really good feedback. People really did enjoy it. So hopefully you enjoy Paul's own podcast just as much. Before we jump into that, as always, quick OptiBaits announcement. The spring sale is coming to a close in literally 1 day's time as I record this. So as of Friday, the sale is over. That's Friday the 26th of June. I realise that doesn't give you guys much notice, and I really haven't promoted it at all. I've mentioned it once on the podcast, and I put up one story post about it, and that is it. It's still been ridiculously busy. Apologies I haven't promoted it more. I've just been too busy as it is, to be totally honest with you. So apologies if you're in finding out now. But it must come to a close. So head on over to optibaits.com if you would like to save yourself some money. That's it for the intro. There's loads more coming up this year. Loads and loads of cool stuff. I will save it. But working flat out behind the scenes. So get excited for some cool stuff coming later in the year. But for now, I hope you enjoy this episode with Paul Martin. Paul, welcome back.
Nice to be back.
Yeah, I hope so. Lots and lots has happened in your world, I'm sure, since we first did our episode, which has only recently gone live. But as I will have said in the last intro, it was recorded quite some time ago. The book is now completely sold out. It's I know it was a stressful experience for you on some levels, but I'm sure very rewarding as well. I imagine you're glad to have sort of tied up that part of your life by now, I'd imagine, aren't you?
100%, mate. 100%. It's it was a lot. It was a lot. You start with an idea, you then flesh it out. You contact the people, you work with them to develop chapters, you build this thing, you hundreds of thousands of words, you refine the whole thing, because I didn't want it to be a poor product. The amount of time I put in and the pressure I put on myself to make it as good as I could make it was ridiculous, really. So considering I didn't earn a penny out of it, because all the money went back to either the BCSG or the costs of producing the book. We actually, our aim at the outset was to sell it at, to break even. I think we made a few £100, but literally we sold all those books, 750 books, and we made a couple £100 out of it because we wanted to keep the cost competitive and make sure that as many people as possible could get it. So the amount of work and effort to not earn any money out of it was it's a bit nuts, really.
I can imagine. And I mean, it's a bit of a legacy thing. Sounds a little bit strong, but you get what I'm saying, don't you? I mean, that's quite a stamp for you to put out there, isn't it? It's quite a big deal, this book, I think, for the bait world.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm as nuts about this sub hobby of bait making as you are, as most of your listeners are. And I've spent hours trawling the internet for papers, buying old copies of magazines where I've just heard that there might even be a chapter by somebody in that's got that is somewhere good on bait and things like that. I'll just collect every bit of information. I've got all the old bait catalogues and all that. I'm bait obsessive, so I knew, but I knew I wasn't alone. And I knew there would be a big market for it. I say a big market, certainly a sufficient market to more than cover what we needed to in terms of sales. But bait, or boilies in particular, which is obviously 99% of what we refer to as bait is it's got such an interesting history. The more you immerse yourself into it, such an interesting history, and people that are, they're just standard blokes off the street, but yet they create something that, and they're non-scientific. They're not even, I hesitate to say it this way, but not particularly intelligent in a traditional sense. They don't have degrees or doctorates and things like that, but they can put something together that just is nothing short of revolutionary. So that part, like the Joe Blogs on the street, can design something that genuinely takes the sport further forwards. That just always makes me smile. Because there's no other sport like it, is there, for that kind of...
No, not really. No, I don't expect there is. No, but I mean, just listening to you there, hasn't the landscape changed? Like you were saying about digging through, articles and just trying to, in the early days of you, and we'll talk about how you got into bait, etc. in a moment, but it's changed how we consume the information. We used to literally have to scrape little bits here and there, didn't we? And I was lucky I had the cart forum quite early on in my bait making experience. So I was lucky there, but I mean, it's nothing like it is now. I mean, with the internet is absolutely freaking huge place. You've now got AI, people designing recipes with AI, which I'm in two minds about, and it's just changed so rapidly, isn't it? But yeah,
it has. I mean, the Carp Forum and the Black Forum and other places where there was people with knowledge and experience were talking on there. They were a useful medium, but Sam, you're still a young pup compared to me. I'm not quite a relic, but I'm getting that way. And my dad was doing it for 30 years before I was born. So, he was certainly in his 30s when I was born. So, but he was making bait he was brought up in Kent, lived in Kent. So he was on Darenth and on Brooklands and on these Hawke Kirby, those places where Fred and his team were doing it, where they were designing boilies from the word go, or like from the ground up, and they're developing. And he was there. He was using, like, to begin with, he was using potatoes, and then he was using particles, and all of these things came through that same group of anglers, but they were always like 4 or 5 sort of steps behind, because they weren't actually. So my dad and the guys that he knew generally weren't pioneering anything. They were hearing a whisper about something that someone else had been using to catch fish on, and a lot of that was Fred's crew, Derek Stritton and all those guys.
Yeah. How old are you now? Don't mind me asking.
Well, I'll be 50 in a couple of weeks, but my benefit, if you like, is that I've got somebody who had 25 years of experience on top of. So you don't start from the ground then?
No, that's massive. I'm 41. I'm only 8 years behind you. I'm probably not as young as you think I am. But that's massive. Yeah, like you say. I mean, he's got more knowledge than most people at that time behind him already, isn't he? If he's rubbing shoulders with the likes of the people you've mentioned, you are streets ahead right from the get-go. So when you were a youngster and you're first starting to want to catch fish and, more importantly, make bait to catch carp, did your dad already have a bait company established, or did that come later? How did that kind of stem about?
No, he was still, so back then, so this would have been the early to mid 80s. He was still buying 1 pint ingredient bags from Hutchie direct from him. So there was in these little white plastic bags that had been heat sealed, and it was a pint of semolina, a pint of calcium caseinate, a pint of soya flour, stuff like that. And that's how you buy it. It wasn't on weight, it was on volume. And these feather meal, it was really quite basic back then. But he was. This is right slap bang in the time when Maggie Thatcher in the recession, the big recessions that were hitting hitting the country. So most people will have been on particles back then, because that was what people could afford. But when we moved up in the mid 80s, we moved up from Kent to Norfolk, and when we moved to Norfolk, a lot of the lakes had particle bans because they'd been absolutely annihilated on things like payments. So there was a lot of bans in place. So but my dad had a bit of a leg up because he'd had these recipes that other guys had given him. He'd caught fish up to sort of mid-20s in Kent and places like that on boilies, which were cutting-edge technology back then. So he's come up with these with recipes that were handed to him, basically, but doing it slowly. And eventually, so when we lived in Kent, it's relative. Even though it's technically the Garden of England, it's still quite a built-up area in many places of it. But you come to Norfolk, and it was back then in the mid-80s. It was still agriculture rich. So lots of that was there's places for pig feed supplies, places for we've got the coastline, so we've got around Lowestoft, we've got fish meal manufacturing plants on the coast. They're literally just up the road. One of the biggest, other than Whitworth's, who do semolina, there's a place, I can't think of the name off the top of my head now, but there's a place in Yarmouth that is one of the biggest suppliers of semolina in the country. So we've got all these things that are close to us. So he starts putting these baits together and developing them, and then as we get to the end of the 80s, he's been developing and making his own baits for a number of years then, and then people start saying to him, "Oh, can I buy some of your bait?" Because they didn't know where to get all this stuff. All they knew was, so back then in the sort of early 90s, there were still people were selling. There were in some shops there was like racks and racks of flavours. There were shelves of individual ingredients, but ready mixed base mixes were just emerging as a thing then, and that was what he did. He started putting together these base mixes based on some of the agriculture. So he got hold of a load of powder palatants, flavoured palatants that were designed to increase uptake predominantly in pigs, and he got hold of these probably in 1990, around that period, and it was just totally different. And you just literally add a teaspoon into 6 eggs and away you go. But if you blended it into a base mix, you could smell it through the bag. It would just fly off the shelves because people thought, well, this is better than anything I can make. But in reality, it might not have been massively different, but it just had that little bit of tech that they didn't know about, which was the palatant. And before you knew it, he was getting labels printed, and then after that, it was going to shops and getting But into the sort of the mid 90s. So this bait company was called Anglia Baits. So there's one or two people that might remember them, but we were still quite a local company for local anglers. But we were in probably up to about a dozen shops at that point, and that's really just Norfolk and Suffolk, because that was what was on our doorstep.
Yeah, sure. What kind of year was this then, when it started really taking off? Yeah,
so early 90s up to the mid 90s, and then as we approached 2000, people were so a lot of the bait companies like Nash and Richworth and some of these other firms, they sort of cracked some of that sort of the rolling, getting it rolled and all that sort of stuff. So that was emerging then. So the sales of ingredients and base mixes were already starting to die off as we got into the early 2000s. Because most people you'll have seen this yourself, mate, because obviously you're selling base mixes and rolled baits now. If somebody can buy it ready rolled, they'll do that 9 times out of 10. They don't want the aggro and the preparation and the risk that something would go wrong. And that sort of my dad it was only ever like a garage business or a shed business. It was they were selling tons of base mix every year, but he had a job that paid decent money and didn't ever want it to become a proper manufacturing job, and that was the next step it had to be from where he was at that time. So it was either double down and get machinery in, or or spend hours in the garage rolling and all this sort of stuff, or get a unit, or what. It was just enough money to tick over, get a new set of rods every year, pay syndicate fees, all that sort of stuff. It was never truly going to ever be a big business.
Yeah.
But we had thousands of photos came in from guys, people who caught personal bests from really tricky lakes. Some of the stories were really great to hear, but one of my favourites is, so we were supplying Waveney Valley Lakes, and I might have mentioned this before, if either in the book or even maybe on the previous podcast. If I have, I apologise, and you can fast forward for 30 seconds. But we were supplying Waveney Valley Lakes, and the fish in there were absolutely hooked on one of the baits, and it wasn't a particularly complex fish meal bait, but it had a lot of fish meal in it, and we were getting it rolled up with a load of salmon oil in it, and I think it had a peach flavour in it, which is not the most original thing, is it? But that was what was.
Definitely not back then, no.
No, exactly. It was effectively a more economic version of the Premier fish food.
Yeah.
It didn't have any milks in it. It was loads of fish meal, loads of fish oil, a drop of peach flavour, and enough other bits and bobs to hold it together, pretty much. But the fish absolutely loved it, and they stacked the weight on. But what would inevitably happen is they'd turn up with their bag of whatever for their week's holiday at Waveney Valley, these anglers, and within 2 days they were in the shop saying, well, I haven't had a bite. They'd hand them a bag of my dad's bait. They'd go out, catch a new personal best, and then the fish would appear in Carp Talk or Angler's Mail the week after, caught on their bait that they'd arrived with in the first place.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Very familiar with that, mate. There's a different story, but yeah. So do you remember what the mix was? This simple mix that worked well?
Not off the top of my head, but knowing what my dad was doing back then, there will have been. My dad loves maize flour, absolutely loves it, or maize meal more than even flour. He thinks carp absolutely love it, and I guess you can't knock the results. So many successful baits have had it in it, and we know they love maize, so why wouldn't they? But it was very basic. It was what you might refer to as a cheap bait with a massive dollop of. So it would have been semo maize. There will have been a bit of budgie protein or something like that in there, which was like an egg biscuit food. Think of like an economical version of the old Prem fish food mix, which was 50% fish, 25% bird food, and 25% milks. Instead of that, it was the 25% milks would have been cheap binders to hold it together.
Yeah, got you. But it worked.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was like a summer bait. Do you know what I mean? It was high. It was super high in oil. There were like 30-40 mil of oil going into a 6 egg mix. It was. But the fish absolutely loved it, which is no different really. It was the forerunner to pellets, really, wasn't it? That kind of bait.
Yeah.
So much fish meal in there that it was easy for them to digest. The semo and the maize they were getting something out of it, but they were just more functional. There was it was doing the job. And even back then, milks were ridiculously expensive. If you wanted to sell a bait for a price that Joe Bloggs didn't balk at, you couldn't really afford to put 25% milks in it. You just couldn't.
No, absolutely, mate. And at this point, are you involved with? So you'd have been kind of teenager, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that, mate. So I was watching more than anything, asking questions, being a pest, saying
fishing yourself and making baits.
Yeah. So back then I'll have been fishing over at Homersfield and Waveney Valley Lakes and Weybridge and places that are well known to people in my part of the world. But things as like I say, as we got to the end of that sort of to the 90s and rolled baits were becoming more prevalent, I decided to start writing in the magazines. So I've always been someone that enjoys writing. So I started writing in the magazines. So I was in Crafty Carp. I think I appeared in pretty much all of them at some point. But I was doing a lot of writing back then. And what then happens is, as soon as you start to appear in the magazines, these companies start approaching you and saying, "Do you want to use our products?" So my dad's sort of interest in his business is starting to decline. So I'm probably about 18, 19 at this point, maybe early 20s. Starting to decline because he's not going to. He did roll baits for people, but it was only ever he was never going to. It was never going to be a big business. He was just like doing a bit here for a bit of pocket money here and there. So then Relham, as they were, who were the distributors for Hutchinson stuff, got in touch, and so over the following 2 or 3 years, I was regular part of their sort of development team, so it wasn't so much the tackle stuff, but the baits were. It was like every couple of weeks or every month, a new parcel had come through, and it'd be something new in there. But I wasn't developing products per se. I wasn't, it wasn't like I was getting a bottle of something unlabeled and saying, "Can you work out what the best dosage is?" But I was getting like 9/10 finished products, like so autumn harvest and Nouvelle Fizz, and he did a red seed, spicy red seed mix, superfish and liver mix. These sorts of things that as they came out, we were like almost just giving things the stamp of approval prior to them going into the shops.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
There were other guys out there, and there's a really detailed chapter in the BCSG book by Sean, who was a real long-term developer of. He really went to town on finding levels and all this sort of stuff. He was right sort of close to Rod in that sense. But I'm not claiming to be anything like that. But we were getting the stuff when it was pretty much ready for the shops, and what we'd then catch on them were then being used to promote the product essentially. So the best one I think I ever had. So I was never a massive fan of the Autumn Harvest or the Nouvelle Fizz, which is obviously what lots of people love. The one I loved the most was the MC mix with the mulberry Florentine flavour. So I think it was a bird food predominantly. Getting information out of Rod was never easy, so he'd never really tell you what was in these a lot. But it was predominantly a bird food bait because he loved instant baits, and he felt that spending too much money on feeding them was kind of defeating the object. So I'm not saying they were poor baits, but he loved things to be instant, and so he was in Louth, which is just down the road from Hayes. So he had everything. So it was big old chunk of the original Robin Red, other bird food mixes like the Sluice stuff, that was all in there, and this powdered monster crab flavour was in the base mix, and you just needed a little dab of Scopex and a little dab of the mulberry, and it was absolutely deadly. Anywhere I took it, I just would, one lake, lake called Weybridge Middle. Number one. It was, I think I did 5 or 6 sessions on there, and it was known as a reasonably tricky lake, but it just became easy, and I caught the biggest fish in there just after a couple of weeks. These weren't massive fish back then; they were like just almost 30 pounds, but they were it just tells you so much about a bait that you can turn up for your very first session on the lake. You can catapult bait in that no one else has ever used on there before, and you catch 320s the following morning, and that's the sum total of what had been out in the previous month to all the other anglers fishing it, and you go, "Wow, this isn't me. This is the bait that's done this." It's you prove to yourself the difference that really good bait can make.
100%. I couldn't agree more. What do you? Obviously, that the ingredients work well together, but do you think there was something in particular in that mix that really made it night and day against other baits? Was it the powdered crab flavour? Was it something else? What do you reckon?
I think it was the powdered crab and the mulberry. I think that the two. I mean, that mulberry flavour is proven to be an all-time classic, isn't it? Everyone loves that flavour. I mean, I think it was just super volatile, that flavour, and the monster crab flavour. I think but I think, like, you know, when we've both spoken to people like Jason Ryder and things like that, and he talks about oil-based flavours and non-oil-based flavours, and you know, he likes to use them together. And I think the powder palatant does a similar thing to the oil-based flavour in it. Stays in the bait, gives it a taste. It does something different to that volatile flavour. And I think the two things they were both super effective, because we know monster crab's a great flavour, don't we? You know, it's probably the best flavour ever, you know, I would say. But it's when you've got the two together, one of the best fruit flavours ever, and one of the best, and even Scopex was in there as well. So I mean, you've got all three of possibly the best flavours and tastes that he'd ever developed. So, but I think he put it in a bird food bait, which was like super coarse, super open, so everything was flooding through it.
Yeah,
I just think it was almost like just a perfect confluence of those three super attractive products.
The monster crab powdered flavour, was this spray dried? Was it like something like tapioca starch sprayed with a flavour, or was it an actual product manufactured from crab?
No, it was an artificial. It was an artificial, yeah, and it was in the mix. So he didn't ever sell it separately. So you only ever got it in the mix. But if you what they call Catch It Labs, they do a powdered monster crab flavour, and it smells exactly the same as what I had in the MC mix back then.
Interesting.
But
fair enough.
But and I say this, but the stuff will knock your socks off. So I mean, we've all got any of us that have made bait in the past. We've got industrial strength nostrils, haven't we, for coping with stuff? But this is like nothing else. It was in a plastic bag, in a bucket, in another bucket, and my neighbour could smell it from her the other side of the brick wall that her garage was on. So my missus said to me, "You've got to get rid of it." So I had this big grand plan a couple of years ago. I was going to make my own version of the MC mix, but I just couldn't keep it in the garage because the neighbours were saying, "I think there's something crawled into the loft and it's dead." You know, it's like.
So, and the Catch It stuff is, do you know if it's the same recipe, or does it just smell the same?
I think it just smells the same. They don't, because I had this conversation with them a number of years ago. I said, "Oh, have you got any of your flavours in a spray sort of dried powder versions?" So because basically back then Rod had a number of flavours that he had powdered versions of. One was Scopex, so we had a Scopex dry mix, which was basically the powdered version. He had a hit and run mix, which I have a feeling that was either based on the mulberry, or it might have been another flavour called Superfruit. I might be wrong on that, but it was a fruit flavour essentially. But they were just something else. Those baits, they were so instant. And then obviously my dad had, going back, if we go back in time, he'd used the powdered palatants, which were often on sweeteners and things like that. So you got a double benefit, if you like. So I didn't need any convincing that powdered flavours in base mixes were massively useful ingredients to use.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I used to actually give for quite a while, caught loads of fish on that, but then Relum lost the distribution. Rod's bait firm sort of, it went in different directions, and I think it might have been bought by an Italian firm, or I might be jumping too far ahead there, but basically things shifted, and that all pretty much came to an end, and at that point a friend of mine from Essex, James Mackenzie, who I've known for 30 odd years, he was using Dave Thorpe baits, or DT bait, and he'd always raved about their stuff, like the pufferfish mix and the what was the cream powder that they used. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. It'll come back to me.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it was Cotswold B+. That was it, because they'd milk B. That's so because DT and Cotswold were owned by the same guys. But he'd always said that their baits were super high quality. He'd been in there, he'd watched them make them and roll them, and and they were dominating the lakes he was fishing. And so I just thought, well, I'm without a home now. My dad had totally stopped at this point, and he was rolling his own bait, but he wasn't selling it. And so I started using their stuff, and literally just as I joined, they were interested in the fact that I'd been sort of field testing some of these other products for Hutchie. Not like I say at the sharp end, but they wanted to give me something that wasn't entirely complete and get my feedback on it.
Got you. So you're a little bit earlier in the developmental stage now.
I am, yeah, and I've got direct feedback into how it performs on the bank.
Yeah.
But what they're supplying, everything is ready rolled, so it's not about rolling it and getting the right levels in. They were selecting that, and that bait was called the R1, which didn't last for that many years. It was a decent bait, don't get me wrong, but it had a liquid food in it, which was the main basis of its attraction, and that became like, it went up overnight. After about 5 or 6 years, it went up overnight like 3 or 4 times its cost, and it just wasn't feasible. So
are you able to name that, because people will want to know?
I don't know what it was that was in it.
Right.
All I know is it was a thick. I assume it was based on the liver was in there somewhere. It had almost a smoky smell to it, almost a smoked coffee sort of smell to it. And as somebody who hates coffee, I wasn't a big fan of the attractor, but there was no doubt the carb loved it. But the key was on getting the levels right, and the bait the base mix that we were using it in they had a fish product called an existing mix called the Fish and Blood mix, which the blood essentially was not blood plasma, it was just blood powder. But I've always found blood powder baits to be quite hit and miss. They either work really well or they don't really work that well. And I think that R1 fell a bit into that mix, in that sort of pigeonhole, in that there were some lakes that it absolutely smashed up, and there were other lakes that it just didn't really work on. So
what do you put that down to, personally?
I can only assume it's to do with taste, because there's clearly food value in blood powder.
Absolutely, yeah. It's great on paper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got everything. Everything ticks the box, and as a bait maker's point of view, it's one of the best things it does is it binds bait and it's cheap. And it adds a nice red colour as well if you're at certain levels. So there's a lot going for it, but I mean, I know some people say it attracts catfish, and other people say tench love it, and things like that. And I suspect those things are absolutely true. But I personally, whenever I've made my own bait, such as I have in the last few years, I've not used it. It's just because it's one of those things. The only way, so because I'm the only person using my bait. If I blank for 6 sessions, I need to know it's not the bait, and it's me. I'm not getting it right. If I take a new bait to a new lake and it's got blood powder in it, the first thing I'm going to be thinking is, I'll blank 6 times. Is it because it's got blood powder in the bait? Because I know it's a potential area of weakness. So, but it could also be a massive area of strength. But it's just, for me, it was always a real hit and miss ingredient.
Yeah.
Have you used it yourself?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think it looks good on paper. It's very functional within the bait, isn't it? It's got good properties to it. But it's in none of the mixes that I sell or am developing. So
yeah,
no,
I do like plasma though. I do like plasma, but only fish meals. The taste, it's got a very strong taste. If you've ever opened many bait makers will have done this, open a bag of plasma and it's light and fluffy and it takes to the air, and you get a little bit just in your mouth. It's like, oh, it's horrible.
It is. Some versions absolutely stink as well, and there's obviously a lot cleaner versions, but again, and it's a really functional ingredient, isn't it? Really functional.
Yeah, but that bait that had that liquid food in, that would have been good chunk of low temperature fish meal, and that would have been the very first low temperature fish meals that were available. That blood meal, that a chunk of sluice in there, because I know how they were putting their baits together back then. I don't know what they do now. Chances are things have shifted somewhat, but they were using sluice in their baits, the CLO, sorry, and they were big fans of greenlet mussel and liver powder, not necessarily together, but like the fish and blood mix had GLM in it normally, and their pucker fish normally had GLM in it. But yeah, great. Again, really good bait. But when that attractor just like it went from something like £100 a litre, which when you're only including 2 or 3 mil is you can kind of work with that if it's only a fraction of that. But it was like suddenly you had to order by the barrel, and the price was 4 times higher even if you bought it by the barrel, which for a bait firm you just can't absorb a £5,000 bill or something for something that goes into one of your products that is not even your best seller. It's
that might potentially go out of date in the barrel before you've actually used it. This
is what small bait makers, we get plagued by this sort of problem, don't we?
We do.
So it's but that was a good product. So I used that, caught some nice fish. Just trying to think where I used that bait. Probably nowhere that anyone who listens to this podcast was listening to. Or would have fished, so Kingfisher Lake in Norfolk is there's a number of kingfishers, but I caught some lovely fish on that, probably up to mid-30s on that, which again for the early 90s, that's they're decent fish, and certainly I've always been someone that worked, so it's and not really travelled until more recently, so there's those baits certainly did me very proud. The next one that they brought out after that, and I was much more involved then, was we were tried testing a number of different things, but the one eventually we progressed was a bait they call the N blend, which was just nut blend basically.
Right.
And it was I think it's a bait they still sell today. I don't know. I was going to
say, I think that's still going, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if I would imagine that it has changed a little since the original version. So I can only talk to the original version or even the test versions of the bait. But the products that were going into that again were Sluice CLO, or by then it might not have been exactly Sluice, it may have been a Hafes equivalent or something like that. An awful lot of tiger nut meal, and probably not an awful lot more in terms of ingredients of note. So from my point of view back then, I was like, oh, okay, what's this going to do then? Because I was struggling to see. I've always struggled to see what nut baits do, if you know what I mean. Like if you tank test anything, you drop a nut buoy in and uptake. Fish are generally sluggish in their response to them, whereas you drop something with protein, particularly soluble proteins in it, into a tank, and it doesn't hit the floor. The fish know instantly. It's like it's an electrical charge almost that goes through the fish, and they instantly know that this is rich in something that they want, and it doesn't even hit the bottom. But nut. Have you found that yourself, or?
I've done lots with nut baits. I mean, I think it's a good I think they make a good canvas in which to put those kind of more supercharged ingredients onto. If that makes sense. I think they've got nutritional benefit. I think they're somewhat good for the fish as well. Although I do think there's probably some. I think they're overused, to be honest. I mean, it feels like most people are using a nut bait. So I would, just for that reason alone, I'd go in a different direction. But yeah, I think they can make a good base for a good bait. To be honest with you, I think I rate them. I like nut baits.
My feeling on nut baits has shifted in more recent years. I've caught a number of decent fish on nut baits in the years since. But back then, nobody was using nut baits back then. So I was looking at them going,
yeah,
what are they bringing to the party? Because it's not like a cooked tiger where you're getting the sugars and the fermentation or anything. It's quite an inert ingredient really in a bait. And
yeah.
So I was thinking, so what we need to add is, and I was saying, so my feedback into the development process was, what we need to do is we need to add some of the milk bead plus. That's what we need to add into it to give it. And so so they were including lamb lac as well in there. So that was giving it its sort of taste. I was pushing for milk bead plus, but they were using lamb lac to do something similar to give it some creaminess to the nutty back note and to the nuttiness. But it turned out to be a much better bait than I thought it would be. And I caught, so there's a lake in Norfolk called it's Broome Back Lake, and it's quite an off the radar place. There's good fish in there now, but back then when I fished it, it was incredibly difficult to catch carp out of there. Incredibly difficult. People will blank whole seasons. It's like 10 acres with about 15 fish in it. It's very deep. So it's one of those where somebody might catch 3 in a session, and then that's the only fish that have been out in 3 months. You know what I mean? It's that those difficult lakes, and what I've noticed on that lake is that the stronger. So when you don't think you've got anything going, quite often you'll turn up and you'll just look for fish and you'll chuck singles at them. But what I noticed is that the fish seem to bolt away from strong flavoured baits, and then I started to think of the end blend, thinking about how relatively bland it is in comparison to a fish meal, not just the flavour levels but the taste as well. And I was thinking, well, maybe this is the direction to go in. And sure enough it was. And I caught, in the end I could almost catch to order from the lake, because I would look at the weather, I'd look at the conditions, I'd know roughly where I needed to be, and I'd be able to put that bait in, and and it would do the job.
And they often do, don't they? The nut baits, they really can do well. I know it used to frustrate Ken. I haven't spoken to him for ages, but Kenny Gates was always frustrated that the other mixes that he'd sort of poured his heart and soul into, so like people could use his nut mix, and it would just catch fucking everything. And it's almost like, why is this working so well? But I guess it doesn't really matter as the why, does it? It's the fact it is that matters the most. That it is working well. I mean, so
I agree. And in recent years, I've used Ken's bait as well, and particularly his nut bait, and I've caught some lovely fish on it. I do generally make my own, but sometimes, like when I was doing the book, I just had no time to sit in the garage and order the stuff in, crack the I get in the car, go down, collect some from Ken, and I'm sorted. I can carry on. But I think with nut baits, I think there's something in the bacteria.
Yeah, for the fermentation side as well, that they obviously lend themselves to, like turning baits is
Yeah, but I also think so. You've got two parts, haven't you? You've got the before it goes in the lake part, which is I think the type, particularly the tiger meal, is a really lovely breeding ground for the bacteria to and the yeast to and things like that to work together, and the sugars to all work together. I think it's a lovely environment for them. But secondly, I think when it goes in and it sits on the lake bed, I think if you look at what the bacteria in a lake environment 90% of what they have to attack every single day is vegetable matter, and I think that they probably find the lake's natural bacteria probably find it quite easy and enjoyable. Well, I mean, a bacteria enjoying what it's eating, that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it will probably find itself to be more in keeping with what the fish are, with what the bacteria are targeting.
Yeah, it's very viable for the bacteria, isn't it?
Yeah, that's probably a nicer way of saying they enjoy eating it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean it's full of starch. You know. What? Sorry.
Bacteria are not sentient beings that
no, well, can't assume things like that anymore. I don't think they might be, you know.
Yeah, you need to wonder what they identify as.
Yeah, exactly.
But so I think the nut baits are very good in that regard. I think they'll sit on the bottom and be there for quite a while and they won't really deteriorate. They'll possibly even get better. Whereas I think with high quality fish meals, I'm not sure that that's the same. I think that they might not last the course quite as well.
I agree with you. Yeah, no, they're going to turn, but in a more negative way. Yeah. I mean, there's loads of starch, resistant starch in the tiger nut meal, and other nut meals as well, isn't there? Which I think is the catalyst for it all. I'm not overly clued up on fermentation, to be honest. It's just an area that I just have no interest in delving into, but I know a lot of people, you know, really do go into it, and for sure those nut meals work great. If you're designing a bait that you want to turn, those nut meals are fantastic for it. And they just catch carp, don't they? They do just catch carp.
They do, yeah. I think I was going to say unfortunately, but I think the reality is for bait makers, particularly home bait makers and people who are not doing it on a very big scale, is that nut baits are the future of carp bait, unfortunately.
Do you think that, do you?
I just think the quality of what is available to most of us now is either patchy or not good enough, really, to achieve what. So I've got a theory, right? And I'm not sure anyone would agree with me, but in my head it makes sense anyway. But carp don't know what's good for them in terms of, you know, low temperature processing and all that sort of stuff. That's science being applied to something to increase its biological value. A carp in its natural environment just knows what flicks the lights on the dashboard. Does that really appeal to me? And I know, because I fished through the late 80s and through the 90s when fish meals were absolutely, they obliterated everything. When those baits were emptying every lake in the country, they were the poorest quality, if you listen to the experts, in terms of biological value for the fish. But they could not get enough of them. Some of the lakes that we were fishing, like Homersfield back in the day, the quality of the bait that was going in there was very poor, but by volume, and the fish meal was incredibly fresh back then, because we were getting it from Lowestoft, and it's literally
your doorstep,
40-minute car journey, and it came off a trawler 2 days before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what you're getting, it was heat treated in a different way, and yes, it wasn't just primed fish or whole fish. It was, everything was thrown in together. And the best fish meal that there was is capelin meal, and that nobody's been able to get that for years. So to me, I don't think fish meal baits are, unless you can get yourself tap yourself into a source of something that is super fresh and it's whole fish, and you're getting an absolute premium product, which most people are not prepared to pay for. I think a lot of the soluble fish meals that we're using these days, they're effectively the carcasses, the scales, the eyeballs, all the old rubbish that we can't do anything else with. They're being sprayed with acid, and to break them down into amino chains essentially, and then they're being dried out and passed off as a soluble fish meal. these are what I would not term as good quality amino chains. These are not the things that switch the carbs. So if you look at like the hydro liquids that are being sold, they're all riding off the back of L030, aren't they? They're all they're totally different products. They're made from totally different raw materials, and they're treated in a totally different way. The fact they're a liquid is the only similarity, and there's fish in them. That's the only similarity. They're just no. For me, I won't go near any of those hydrolyzed fish liquids. They're so acidic. I'm convinced that the fish find them too much.
Yeah, I mean, the proper original L030, not watered down shit that people were selling in towards the end of it, but that was one of those ingredients that made a genuine difference, didn't it? Like going back to the earlier part of this podcast, I think it was the monster crab flavor. You thought that was something really pivotal in that bait that made it stand head and shoulders above other things that you were using. I think L030 was one of those things, and obviously it's no secret, everyone knows it's great, but it really was superb stuff, wasn't it? And I think it's hard to match that these days. I think there's some fantastic liquids out there that perhaps aren't fish-based.
I think it's like you've had guys like Marcus on, haven't you? And he's producing his own meals. And you, for me, unless you can do something like that, I mean, like I've got a very good friend, Kevin Willisey, and he's in the BCSG book. He makes his own bait, has done for years. He gets ridiculed by all of his mates because they're all in a bait team. But he absolutely loves what he does, and you cannot fault his enthusiasm. He absolutely loves making his own bait. But yeah, he's had a bait that he's used for years, but the fish meal, the supply of the fish meal is so patchy now that he's having to adjust his bait in response to that. And to me, that defeats the object of why we've all had a bait that we bought from somebody that we loved for a long period of time. And then that changed, and you open the bag and you go, hang on, this is different.
Yeah.
And immediately your confidence is knocked.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I do, but if you're dealing in a bait that is rich in fish meals, they will change during the year anyway, just because the fish change themselves seasonally. Yeah. So it's not always a fucking bad thing. The
problem being that when you buy such small quantities, so if I'm doing a season's worth of a fish meal bait, I might only order 10 kilos of fish meal, and I'm thinking, right, well, I'm going to start rolling in January, February, so I've got it in my freezer ready to go. So I'm only going to order 5 kilos because I want another 5 in June, so I've got some freshness in the product, and it's not just been sat in the garage for 6 months. And you'll get 2 lots of fish meal that are the same but totally different, and that you can't help but feel sort of. If you pay loads of attention to your bait, which we do, and that's why we make our own, then you can't help but feel a bit concerned by things like that.
I agree.
So my personal feeling is that as I go further forwards with over the next year or two, when hopefully my life has calmed down a little bit, is that the only things that don't change are nut meals, milk proteins, and your basic sort of seeds. Grain products. And if you want to develop a bait that is not going to change and you can use for 20-30 years and just tweak the hell out of it to get it perfect, then you have to stick to those things, because in 6 years we are at the absolute bottom of the food chain when it comes to we're below pet food, aren't we?
Oh my god, yeah.
So you've got best befores on. Like some of the bird food products that I use are just oh crikey, I'm trying to remember the name of them now, but they're absolutely phenomenal products. But I'm under no illusion that they're not exactly fresh, because they're bakery products, and they're at the bottom of a different processing chain. They go into another processing chain, and then they eventually find their way to me. But with fish meals, that the biological value in those is so high compared to a bread product that the room for deterioration or for it to go rancid or for something to go is so much higher. So really, fish meals, don't get me wrong, like 5 years ago, you wouldn't have convinced me to use anything other than a fish meal bait because they've been so effective over such a long period of time. But my feeling is I need to be going down a different route with things that I can use sustainably and are consistent and are going to be the same, come rain, come shine.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I try and get food grade, ingredients the best I can as much as possible, and it does obviously it adds a premium on. But I think it's worth it. I genuinely think it makes a difference.
I would agree, but you're in a slightly different position to me and the average person, because you're producing something that you're going to sell. You're shifting volume you're probably shifting volume in a week that I wouldn't use in a year. So we're in a slightly different position.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I try to, and I think I do actually. I think I make the bait exactly and sell the bait exactly how I would if it was just me using it, if that makes sense. And I know bait makers get a bad rap, bait companies, I should say. But I think there are a few of us that are doing this, that are really trying to do it the right way. And it's not always doable. And, there's obviously sometimes the supply issues and it makes for a more clunky service to the customer. But I think the customers that are on board with it really appreciate it. It's just tricky. And I mean, there's a stoat just ran out in front of me and it's having a pop at a pheasant. Sorry.
Who's winning?
They're just having a bit of a standoff at the minute. Now the pheasant's just standing his ground. The stoat's now just run along the fence. That was very odd. Sorry, mate. What was I saying?
That you make the bait the way you would want it for yourself.
Yeah. Yes, and I think there's stoats just ran back across the road by there. Yeah, and I think there is a few of us doing this. There really is people out there trying to bring more of a homemade home rollers bait to the masses, to the market. Actually, we mentioned Kenny Gates earlier. I mean, he's shifting quite a lot of boilie, and I believe he is still doing it largely in line with how someone like yourself would do. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. But as you said, we cannot get away from the fact that fish meal changes throughout the season. Different ingredients change. There's a lot of other companies that are obviously buying up out-of-date shit because it's super fucking cheap. And these bigger companies, I mean, and the smaller ones as well, it's a numbers game, isn't it? If you're getting X product, a fraction of the price because it's out of date, and these companies have X amount of employees to support, they have to get the income rolling through the door, month in, month out. You can understand why they do it, but it just leads to a poor playing field of bait. But then again, that's where someone like me, small bait business, can shine. It's where someone like yourself, making bait for yourself, home roll. I mean, the home roller, obviously very much a dying breed in this age of convenience. But you do have a real chance to do something that stand out when everyone is using, name the big company on the lake. You can do something genuinely different and just tip the scales in your favor. And I love that. Absolutely fucking love that.
Yeah. Anyone that has got us a big love of making bait is inevitably has had 2 or 3 experiences where they know that the quality of their bait has led to them catching something that they wouldn't have caught on something else. They take no convincing. But if you're not going to properly immerse yourself into it and really learn a bit about what you need to do, if you put it this way, if I was going to just do it as a cost saving exercise and say, right, I'm just going to buy a ready-made mix from AA Baits, and I'm not picking on AA Baits, this is just for example, like a 50-50 mix type thing, and all I'm going to do is add 5 ml of strawberry, and I'm just going to do that because it's cheap. Then, as far as I'm concerned, and I know this might sound elitist, but they're not really part of our hobby. They're and by our hobby I mean bait making. They're doing something different. But for me, if you're just going to have a little tinker around, you may end up costing yourself more fish than if you'd just gone out and bought a bag of cell. It's for me, you have to find somebody who who understands the detail, and try and really embrace it, because the rewards are massive if you can get it right. The problem we've got is, like, it's a bit different for you, Sam, because you've got guys that are using your bait every week. But for me, if I'm making my own bait and there's a recipe off the shelf, or a recipe out of my book that it's just been a paper one, that might take me a whole season of tweaking to get that right. Most people haven't got that time, and they won't do 50 nights in a year to get that feedback, and they'll go, well, that didn't work, so I'm going to drop this and I'm going to include that, and effectively it's a totally different bait.
Yeah, and that is one advantage that, I mean, there's many advantages that a small company like mine or a bigger company has, is we can use field testers, proper field testers, not people getting a polished product just a bit ahead of time. I'm not on about that. I'm on about people actually helping, tweak levels, change things, try different versions. That is such a luxury, because obviously years gone by, just like yourself, I would have to test everything myself, and actually being a field tester is not very fun because the time that you get to fish it is, for a lot of people, very important. It's very precious. I was lucky, I used to do it a lot, but still, you don't really want to be sat behind outrageous ideas that could and probably will completely fail. That's not fun at all.
I've got a great example of that, Sam. So after I was at DT, I went to Nash. DT, they sold up to some different people, so it was just a case of I wouldn't have been dealing with anyone I knew, sort of thing. And I knew someone at Nash, and they said, "Oh, come and use our stuff." The person I know was Keith Sykes, who is quite well known to some people who make bait.
Yeah.
But so Keith had what was termed the A team, and the A didn't stand for anything in particular. It was just the team that got all the weird and wonderful creations that came out of Gary and Keith's brain. And we got to, they'd just run 50 kilos off, post 10 key to 5 different guys, and I was one of them, and we'd give them a whirl. And the majority of the stuff that came through was absolutely fine, but it wasn't sort of better than Scope X did, or it didn't sort of stand out as being, oh yeah, we need to get this. But the one that really stands out, not in terms of the results it got, but how big a failure it was the Key Cray.
Mm-hmm.
Now, crayfish meal was on everyone's lips about 7 or 8 years ago, something like that. Nobody's using it now, and that's because it doesn't catch fish. And but there was another podcast back then, which was Jamie Klossick's one, and Kevin, he would have Kevin Nash on it each week or each month with a little update, and he kept mentioning crayfish meal, that they tested it and it was great and it was this and it was that. But we went through a number of versions of the bait, and we got to what was the final version, or close to the final version, just small tweaks, and actually the flavour that we had in it was a version of the liquid that was in R1, the DTR1. Do you remember I said it was like a liquid food and it had a sort of smoky coffee smell?
Right.
There was a version of that. It wasn't the same liquid, because the original liquid was sort of syrupy and brown, and this stuff was not syrupy and it was clear. So it was a slightly different product.
Right.
But it had a very similar smell. But
is that, sorry to interject, is that the only connection that you're making? Is it smelt the same, or do you know that it was a similar substrate it was made from?
No, I know that it came from the same supplier, because Keith told.
Right.
But but it wasn't exactly the same product.
Right. And it's something you don't want to name, presumably.
It's something I don't know the name of. Right. I don't really keep secrets. It's not really.
Right.
It's not unless there was commercial interest in it, and
of course.
But Nash no longer exists. DT don't use this product anymore. If I knew it, I'd tell you it. But this particular liquid was attractive to fish. So it's still, even though it wasn't the complete sort of liquid food type before. So I was fishing at the time. I was fishing a lake called Braxted Back Lake, which is, anyone that's in the east of England who knows, who wants to fish for big fish, particularly commons, they'll know this one. It was home of a fish called the Backup, which only died last year, but I was about 60 or 70 years old. It was a phenomenal fish, and it was 40 for probably 30 years. It was just a phenomenal fish. Anyone who's anyone pretty much in Essex and the surrounding areas caught that fish, although I was travelling from Norfolk for it. But anyway, so I've taken this bait over there to test. In December, literally first day, I've chucked it out, just a single hook bait, nothing else, because in December, let's be honest, it's a fish meal bait. I'm not going to be putting, so I had fish meal and crayfish meal in it, so I'm not going to be sticking any of that out in December. I'm just going to go with a single hook bait. And probably 2 hours later, £30 common, December, freezing cold, bright conditions, absolute worst day you can think of. So I'm rubbing my hands together going, this bait is phenomenal. I'm going to absolutely clean up. And over the course of the next 6 months, what transpired is that I probably went through 50 or 60 kilos of the bait on there, and I only caught probably another 6 carp on it. And
why did you start using so much when you got the result without using much?
Yeah, so that was December when I caught the fish on the single hook bait. Once you get through to May, June, July, there's a big head of tench and bream and other things in there. So casting out single hook baits was not going to be the way. But out of those 6 carp that I caught one of those fish 3 times. So I only caught 4 different fish. And after a while, I was so dispirited by the results because everyone else was catching that I started using a different bait on one rod. So you can only use 2. So I went back to a previous favourite, which was the TG Active, which was a tandoori garlic. And I'll tell you a bit more about that bait in a minute because there is stuff that is potentially helpful. But that bait, I hadn't used on that lake before, but I'd used elsewhere previously, and I caught very well on it. But that TG Active, I think I ended up with 15 fish on that rod, compared with effectively 4 fish on the other rod. And we just could not catch fish on that key cray. It just didn't work. And sure enough, a year later, or a year and a half later, it just dropped out the range. We had a big old surge in sales when it was initially released, but it hadn't really been as successful as we needed it to be.
So sorry to interject again, but
you're right.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because other people that I've spoke to that have been kind of close to it, who I won't name, but you've mentioned them on the podcast, have said actually that was a phenomenal bait and it was too expensive to make and blah 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 blah.
So that was the key, not the key cray.
Okay.
So the key, which was really...
Yeah, I'm getting confused here.
Yes,
yeah. There's 2 different ones, was there? I never used any of them, by the way.
Yeah. So I didn't use the key, the standard key.
Right.
I wasn't involved in the development of that. They would just that was just come to market when I joined them from DT.
And this was a coated type bait.
No, so that's that's a different product. That's the cultures. So that's just a hook bait. Which was essentially a wafter coated with paste and dried out. So, so we're in danger of going all over the show here. But
yeah.
No, you're fine. But so the key was the very best fish meals, soluble livers, hydrolyzed livers, and quite a large chunk of milk proteins, and that was the one they were selling for 15 quid a kilo or 18 quid a kilo, and everyone was up in arms about it. But that was what was required for what was really a premium product, and it worked very well on a certain type of water.
What type?
What I would say is they were the sort of places where you don't need much in the way of volume.
Yeah.
So there are some lakes where you need volume, aren't there, to stop groups of 4s and 5s in their tracks. And if you've got a single or a stringer or a pouch of bait down there, they don't even drop. If you've got, so like this Braxton Duck Lake, we would use 3 kilos of bait. Literally, you get there at 6, so I was working in Cambridge. It took me an hour to get there. It's a days only lake. I'd drive there. I'd be there at 6, and I can fish till 10. So I'm fishing. I've got 4 hours of fishing, and I put 3 kilos of bait out, and I'd get bites at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. So
okay. Sorry, carry on.
So that's the kind of venue that the key wouldn't have worked particularly well on.
Yeah.
Because what you've got is a big shoal of fish there. They're hunting in packs, and they're big fish. You know, like you might catch the biggest, but you'll effectively catch hardly anything. If you see what I'm saying, if you just use stringers and tiny amounts, and you run the risk of just getting breamed or tenched, and you needed to make a statement. And for 4 hours of fishing, I've never used so much bait. You just think it's unbelievable that you could put 4 kilos or 3 kilos of 18 or 20 millers out there, and you get bites off it. 2 hours later. But that was what happened. But that key was so if you've got a lake that generally is a lower stock, older fish, not too much in the way of pest fish because it's quite soft. The bait was quite soft. There was a lot of things like what was it, ambio or multimino, things like that. There was quite a lot of that in there. So it was very nutrient dense. So I would suggest that it was. You can probably picture, you could use it on Car Park Lake at Yateley back in the day. Do you know what I mean? You'd be thinking of things like that. But if you're turning up to these newer waters where the density of fish is quite high, it's probably not really the way for it. Unless you're on a bait deal and you can afford to stick 4 kilos, 5 kilos of it in per day at 18 quid a kilo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're not paying for it.
So I get you completely. Do you know the recipe? Do you know what it was made of, or did you just have some kind of indication of what was in it?
Well, so the original key was I don't know the proportions and the exact ingredients, but they were using low temperature fish meal. That would have been the original L0, which was the capelin and herring. That was the best gear you could get.
LT94.
Yeah, but everything's called LT94 these days.
You said L0.
Oh, sorry, mate. Sorry.
Yeah. No. So I just wanted to be clear. I wasn't trying to be a dick or anything.
You don't need to be. I can be that instead. But yeah, so you've got that as sort of the core of the bait. There was hydrolyzed liver in there. There was knowing Keith, he would have probably preferred to put lactalbum in there, but obviously we can't get that, so it would have been WPC80 and probably quite a chunk of it. And he may even have had calcium caseinate in there, and maybe a couple of other caseins. The 2 different acids in it. He may well have had the 4 in there, but they would have been at levels that were to optimise the amino appeal rather than to be functional, because it was intentionally soft. It did have quite a lot of minamino and stuff like that in there, and I'm not even entirely sure it had a flavour in it. It was just a really nutrient rich bait.
So sorry, interrupting you again, very rude. But you said earlier it had liver powders in there. Was it more than one type of liver powder?
No, I think it was just that was if that's what I said. I meant it was a simple.
Right. Okay. Cool.
I think it's literally just a hydrolyzed liver powder. I think that's what was in there.
Chicken or
knowing what they could get hold of, then I would imagine it was pork.
Right.
Because that's what Gary's preference was, and that's what he had in the factory. He would have preferred beef, but we couldn't get it back then.
And he preferred pork over chicken liver?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and I must admit, what Gary told me about liver powders, I've found myself to be 100% the same, which is it's cow, pig, and then chicken. in terms of what the carp like the most. But
I wouldn't entertain anything other than beef in my personal opinion. But I know a lot of people rate the chicken. A lot of people really like the chicken powder, but there's a few on the market, isn't there?
There are, but this is 15 years ago, and the beef wasn't available. The best we could get was like that now beef powder. You know what I mean? The
Argentinian beef,
which wasn't hydrolyzed, was it? It's just beef powder. So that was the best we could get, but it was, that's not going to. Gary's not going to include that because, firstly, the cost, and secondly, it needs to be under a price ceiling of a raw bait. So we used that, but the TG Active was sorry. Just to jump back a second, the Key Cray really wasn't a great bait. We caught fish on it, but it was not better than the TG Active, which is the tandoori garlic active. Now that bait was a bird food predominantly. Did have some fish meal in it, but that was
I've lost you, mate. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you. I don't know if it's my signal or your signal, but you dipped out then.
Okay.
The last. Yeah, you're back now. Last I heard was the TG Active was a bird food.
Yeah, so it did have some fish meal in it, but it wasn't what I would term a high dosage fish meal. So I'm classing that more as a bird food in the sense that that's probably the bulk of what was in it.
Right.
Then in that we also had a tandoori flavour, which was a synthetic flavour. It had garlic essential oil in there, and it also had a tandoori tandoori curry paste in it.
Okay.
So that was it was an oil based paste, and the garlic essential oil and the flavour were blended into it essentially.
Yeah.
Because the tandoori flavour was oil based as well, so it all blended in nicely. But that I don't know the levels that was included in the baiting, but having experimented with my own stuff afterwards, I came very close to being able to recreate that bait, and it was probably the best Nash bait I ever used in probably the 7 or 8 years I was using the gear. But its attraction for my money came from the oily spiciness.
Yeah. And do you know where the flavour and the paste were sourced from?
I don't, but there's a curry paste, a tandoori curry paste that you can get from a company called Pearl, and you can buy it online in big containers, and it's probably like a litre or 2 litres in this container. I think it's something like 1.7 pounds or something it weighs. It's a big tub anyway, and you would probably put 50 to 60 grams of it, which is probably broadly equivalent to the volume if you measured it, and you'd put that into say 6 eggs, and it comes through lovely. It comes through lovely. I would if I was trying to replicate it now, I'd just create something a spicy bird food bait. I wouldn't even bother with a fish meal. I'd get some of that curry paste and some of that garlic essential oil, and just literally crack on with that, and you make something that is so attractive, so instant, and it flies through the fish as well. It just does everything that you need it to do.
Nice.
Yeah, there was nothing fancy in there. There was no milk proteins. There was no. There was an enzyme added. I don't know what enzyme that was added because it was called TG Active. I don't know what that was, but I made versions of it without any enzymes added that were just as effective. And I think it probably was the same curry paste, to be honest, as that Pearl stuff, because it smelled exactly the same in the bait, and the fish bloody loved it, absolutely loved it.
So the enzyme was. Did this bait have a coating to it?
No.
So it was added pre-boil, or did they do something else with the enzyme?
As far as I'm aware, it was added pre-boil. Yeah.
Right.
I wasn't. I didn't see the manufacturing process of the finished baits.
Right.
But what I did get was a sort of a kit, if you like. I got sent through some mix and some liquid to make my own cork balls with. So there was no separate. Now you need to treat it afterwards. So I can only guess, if you like. I assume there was a powder added in during the liquid stage or something like that.
Right. But I mean, if it was a carb heavy bait, quite possibly amylase, would you say?
That would be the route I would go down, but I don't know. The problem is when
we're just guessing, aren't we?
Yeah. The trouble is when you've seen behind the curtain and you know exactly how baits are made. It's like there's a phrase. There's two things you should never see being made. One is laws, the other is sausages. Well, you could add a third. Well, that's carp bait, because it robs you of a lot of the romance of it and the idealism that there's a bit of this and a bit of that, and sometimes a label like active or something like that might be added to a bait, and there's not actually anything that's added. It's just a better name. You know what I mean? And that's the way some of these things are.
Yeah. Yeah, got you. So, and where did you move to from there in terms of your either using a bait or developing a bait?
So from there I was with Baitcraft for a little while, because by the time I finished with Nash, so this was me, I was paying for bait at Baitcraft. It was what is the best bait that's out there right now, because I'd not rolled my own for so long that I didn't have any of the kit anymore. So I was like, what do I need? Who's making the best bait out there? And
T1 for sure,
mate. Yeah, what a bait! What?
I thought my timeline's all messed up. I remember Nash coming out with TGX. I'd never used it.
Yeah.
And the key crate, I thought that was long after T1 had changed and it was all a slippery slope. It all kind of went downhill, didn't it?
It did, but there's a lot of overlap there. So the T1 had been out a number of years before I got to use it, so I cannot speak of the original.
Okay.
The stuff he was rolling out of his garage, rolling. I don't know, or his shed. Sorry, I don't know what that product was like. But what I do know is that everyone, because I fish at Save, there were so many guys on there who were using that, and it was a phenomenal bait. By the time I started using it, it was still a phenomenal bait because everywhere I took it, I caught fish on. Really tricky Norfolk Lake.
What kind of year? What sort of year is this that we're talking?
It's got to be about 2010. Now 20. No, it might even be a little bit later than that. 2012.
Right.
Something around that time. So we just brought out the bait called the Save Salmon, which was essentially the T1 just with a different flavour.
And there was what was? Did he have a white bait that came out around about that time as well?
Well, he had three baits. He had a white bait that was a milk protein bait, but that's how he described it. But it was probably quite carb heavy, but with milks in it.
Right.
But he also had a bait that wasn't as dark a fish meal, and that was called the. Oh crikey! It'll come back to me in a minute. But you had the T1, you had the Save Salmon, you had another one. Super K. That was it.
Super K.
Yeah.
No, and then he did a winter one or something, didn't he? A white winter bait, or have I got that mixed up?
No, that was the milk protein bait. The white.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had a Snowball. That one was called.
Snowball. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the Super K was almost, and I say almost because I've spoken to Mark about this at length. It's almost exactly the same as the T1, but it didn't have the Robin Red in it, so it was a very much paler bait, and it had 2 or 3 little trick bits that he was very vague about Now, knowing what I know about him, he's probably things along the lines of MSG, Embutyric, that they probably along the organic acid route that are sort of stuff that Jason Ryder would be talking about, when he starts going down that avenue. So I don't think they were things that aren't commonly available. Let's put it that way. I think they were, but there's a lot of mileage in those products that is unused in today's bait. Like MSG is still a phenomenal ingredient. It always was, and it always will be. You just need to get the test and tinker and find the right level.
Super cheap as well.
Yeah, ridiculously cheap. But so we had those baits and the Savay salmon, and I mean, there's a lake in Norfolk called Snetterton, which is near Snetterton Raceway, and I mean, I can talk about it. It was always very hush hush, but it was the big fish in there has now been dead a number of years, but it was one of very few places that had a 40-pounder in it, and I did one night and caught it. And that was, there's a lot more to the story than that, because I did a lot of prep and a lot of watching and stuff like that. But I have no doubt in my mind that bait helped me catch that fish. Literally.
Which bait?
Obviously, the bait salmon that I was using.
Right.
And like I say, though, it was exactly the same bait as the T1. It just didn't have the. Now, this is going back now. The flavours that Mark used were from Campbell's. And the flavour that was in, so obviously in the Savay salmon was a salmon flavour, but in the T1 was a flavour called, now Mark didn't tell me this, someone else told me this, so I could be wrong, but it was called giant shellfish. And I think you can still buy it, but I know that from other conversations I had with Mark, that he tank tested all of his flavours, every liquid that went into his baits was tank tested, and he would only use a handful of flavours, and he effectively created his own flavour with that giant shellfish. That wasn't like an off the peg flavour. It was stuff that they got strong responses to. They isolated the 2 or 3 things that they think were the attractive things, and they came up with that flavour.
Got you.
But it's on their list, or it always was on their list. So you can order it, I think, from Campbell's or whatever they're called now.
Right.
What are they called now?
Plantex.
Plantex, that's it. Yeah. So you can get that, but the liquid that fish, I caught it so quickly after. I literally underarmed the rod in and sunk the line, and I hadn't even folded my chair open, and then it's gone, and that fish is on the end, and it's like, well, it's only had like not even a kilo of these baits yet, you know what I mean? And I had no doubt in my mind that the bait was one of the big things that was responsible for that fish, catching that fish. But I think that was the confluence of a number of premium products at the same time. He had the very best fish meal that has ever existed, and it wasn't just high biological value. It was, they loved it. They loved the taste of it, and they loved everything about it.
Yeah.
He had the L0 that he wasn't just coating baits on. He was putting like 30-40 million per kilo directly into the mix. He had lactalbumin going in there. He had bird foods. He had the original Robin Red, which was still just clinging on at that point. Do you know what I mean? He had and then he had the best liquid attractors he could get in there. So he had salmon oil and a flavour. So, but it was, I think, for me, that's probably the last premium bait that probably will ever exist. I mean, I know Mark a bit. I mean, I wouldn't say we're friends, but I know him a bit, and I interviewed him for the book. But for me, that's the best bait that there ever has been. And that's for boilie that there ever has been, and that's just me. I know things went south after a while, and the business went in a particular direction, and it is what it is. But for a period,
I presume it's just the ingredients weren't available to the guy. Through no fault of his own, he had to close up shop, didn't he? He just couldn't get the ingredients. That's the gist I've got.
Yeah, there were a number of things that happened. One that he doesn't talk about and has never been reported is that his son was really, really ill, like in hospital, permanently ill. when I met up with Mark last year, I didn't ask him how his son was, just in case he said he died. You know what I mean?
Right.
His son was really ill. And at the same time, he's got guys turning up at his unit, trying to haggle him down on price. Lactalbumin has disappeared because they just can't get that anymore. The fish meal supply is slightly different. The L0 disappears. And it's not about price, that, is it? Lactalbumin and L0, that's not about price. That's just about they don't exist anymore. The fish...
Lactalbumin does, but you wouldn't like the price. It's fucking insane.
Yeah, you can get pharmaceutical grade lactalbumin, but
exactly. But you can't use it in a bait.
Yeah, it's about like 40 quid a kilo, something like that.
No, it's way more than that. Way. A couple of hundred. Yeah.
But so he had those premium. He had those products, and they're just not there anymore. Don't get me wrong. What he was left with were still good baits. They were just like anyone else's baits at that point.
Yeah,
that's my view, not his, by the way. But what he's probably got is the best liquid flavours and attractors he can possibly get in there. But he hasn't got the lactalbumin, but he still has got probably 10% milk still in it. He's still got caseins and whey protein in there. So it's still a better bait than what you're buying from most other people. And you know he's going to be a stickler for freshness, and you know that it's going to be properly done and properly made, and it's going to be rolled to order. So there was a lot still good about it. And then right at the very end, and his son was obviously, the backdrop is his son not being well. The fish meal supply just overnight just stopped, so he had to go and get a random off-the-shelf fish meal that he had no input into, and then he had all these orders and no product really. So he had to. It was either refund everybody, which meant that he's a business, he's got a mortgage to pay, or produce something that he wasn't happy with, and he produced something he wasn't happy with for literally a couple of weeks, and then he shut the doors. He just said, I can't do this. This is the trouble with all bait makers, isn't it? You're all idealistic. Every one of us is idealistic. And as soon as you sell your first kilo to a friend, suddenly everything shifts. You have to start thinking differently. You have to think about, how much can I afford to do this for? What about my time? And then if it builds to a point where it's taking up, so you're so busy, but it's something you love, then you've got to then pay your mortgage out of that. And that leap is the one that kills all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
Very tough, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I would never go down that route. I mean, I've had lots of people ask me if they could buy my bait in the past, but there's not a chance I'd do it. It's not that I don't. I'll tell them what's in my bait. I'm not worried about that. It's firstly, I don't have the time, but secondly, as soon as you start selling it, there comes a reliance on that money. You start thinking, well, that 500 quid or that £1,000 or whatever it is, I'm going to do this with it. And then you start pushing it, and your focus shifts away from what the beginning of the quest, which is, how do I make the best bait I can make? So yeah, cool. We've taken some stuff in today, haven't we?
Yeah, and there's certainly a lot of people that go down that route. There's no denying that, for sure. I agree with that kind of proportion of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have. We covered a lot of different things. I mean, and I guess that kind of takes you up to present time, does it? Was that the last?
Yeah, pretty much. So
something you're involved in, or?
Yeah, so since Baitcraft folded, I've pretty much I've rolled my own or just bought the odd little bag from here and there, like Kenny, who I would absolutely trust 100%.
Yeah.
Just to get me out of a spot when I'm too busy to roll my own. But my dad is 76 and he still rolls his own bait, you know, and there have been times I've had bait deals where he could have used whatever I was on, and he still wants to make his own.
Yeah.
So that stubborn streak is in both of us still, and I don't see it ever going.
He must be incredibly proud of you for doing this BCSG book.
Well, I'd hope so, but I think one thing I would say is that there are many, many ways to make a good bait. You don't have to be an advocate of one thing or one approach. One of the chapters I never managed to do for the book was I wanted to go back to Fred Wilton and just say to him, sit in a room with him for half an hour even, just say, we all know what you wrote about in the past, that milk protein and blah, blah, blah. Do you still feel that way? 50 years on now, do you still feel that way? You've done 50 years more research. Are you still at that point? And unfortunately, he said, he politely declined. He said there's been far too much interest in, and he doesn't want the aggro, basically.
Yeah.
The reality, though, is that he still believes in milks. He still absolutely believes in milks. He doesn't use fish meals. He won't use any of those sorts of products.
Do you know this for a fact?
Let's put it for a friend of a friend. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So I've not been able to have direct conversations with him, but he still believes 100% in the original concept that he had, and he uses the same ingredients that as well as he's able to that was back then. So he feels that everything is perfect. Is what he designed back then has stood the test of time, and for him, he's highly successful, and his baits are still brilliant. So anyone I know that uses the stuff, whether they're using his recipe or he's supplying them or whatever, that they still catch tons of fish, but they're very expensive because they're almost entirely milk products. And yet you get somebody like Gary Bays or Bill Cotton, both people I've spent time talking to, they just wouldn't agree. They would say, well, what I'm getting from those milk products, I can get from other things at a fraction of the price. And who's to suggest one is right and one is wrong? They're just different views. Some of the most successful baits ever made. Like probably the Trigger from NutriBaits, Scopex Squid from Gary, and probably the Cell. They're probably the three most successful baits in terms of sales and overall carp catches ever. And knowing a little bit as I do about the Trigger, and a little bit as I do about the Scopex Squid, they're not very far apart from each other. The attractor pack is different, but relatively similar in some ways as well. A powder, spray dry powdered, included in both of those baits, and with a really effective liquid, but not like Mark's bait, not like a premium product underneath it.
Yeah, I mean the last 10% of a bait, last 2% of a bait can transform it dramatically, can't it?
It can.
They don't always need to be drastically different.
Yeah.
To give different results and have just to be a different bait altogether.
Yeah. It's all, yeah. In some ways, bait making is all. Taking a bait from nothing to completion, it's all in the last 5%, isn't it? So much of it is a concern of construction and manufacture. As soon as you start putting stuff on rollers, depending on the type of roller that you've got and whether it's a three roller, if that makes sense. So the sausage drops in between two rollers and then another one holds it there for a minute, or if it's just one that has to drop directly through two rollers, or it's one of these C-shaped ones where it just rolls around the back and out the bottom. The first concern of any of these people that stick stuff through a machine is how do I keep the ball round and survive the manufacturing process. That's their fundamental, and then everything else comes secondary, which is why us guys who do our own or roll them on shillums and things like that. That's why why our baits are the best baits that you can buy.
Far less constraints, for sure.
Yeah. Well, if you sat down, crikey, I'm running on now. But if you sat down in a room and you said, right, so I'm going to make my own bait. Why do I want to make my own bait? Well, I want to catch more fish. Okay, so what do I need to do to catch more fish? I want that bait to be more attractive, and as soon as you start saying I want it to be more attractive, then you would put it needs to be firm after 24 hours. That's probably down 4 or 5 on your list. But as soon as you start selling that product,
exactly,
that needs to be number 2, and number 1 is how do I get it through the rollers round? And that's the thing. So if I've caught loads of carp on baits I couldn't even get to roll in the rollers, but I've just squirted them across the table and just chomped them with the rollers. Just because they're barely hanging together. So yeah, lots of decades worth of failure, punctuated with brief moments of success. Yeah.
Well, let's hope there's many more decades, because you never stop learning, do you? There is no completion here. There's always something else to tinker with. There's always something else on the horizon, isn't there? Yeah. And I think you're probably the same as the rest of us. There's just not enough time to test it all. That is the problem. The ideas are not usually in short supply, are they, for people like you and me?
No, and so the reason that I think that guys like Gary and Bays and Bill Cotton, I think the reason they were probably the 2 most successful, if you exclude Mainline, because they're doing their own thing with enzymes and that kind of stuff. But in terms of if we think about the massive bulk buying bait public, Scopex, Squid and Trigger, and probably the Big Fish Mix to an extent, but those baits were community developed, those baits. They were refined over a number of years through multiple data points. So that I'm getting a bit technical, if you like, in describing it that way. But when I develop a bait, if I don't develop it for the lake I'm fishing, or if I'm developing something for the lake I'm fishing, then when I get to the end of that process, all I know is that bait works on that lake. Because it hasn't been tested on a multitude of venues, hasn't been tested in a multitude of situations, because I'm not winter fishing these lakes. You know what I mean? I'm fishing when I can, and I've got other things to do in the winter. So it's a very narrow field. Whereas if you go to one of these, like I don't really know what's out there all day in the market these days. I know what Ken does, and his stuff is all good. But back in the day, Scopex, Squid and Trigger, like I say, they were community developed baits. Gary was getting feedback on Scopex Squid from, he had a team of testers, he had like various levels of guys, and it was based on a previous mix with a refinement. So everything had been tested to the nth degree. That is so you can get away with a set of, in theory, inferior products and still produce a supreme final product, because you've got the opportunity to tweak it to the nth degree. Whereas we don't have that. We haven't got the time, the resources, or the energy, because we've got lives to get on with.
Exactly. Yeah.
So for us, it's, there have been community developed baits in the past, haven't there? So I was part of the Homemade Bait Buffs group on Facebook, which is a great place to learn stuff. And there was probably 30 or 40 of us on there that developed the bait that they went on to.
I've seen the recipe. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that it's groundbreaking.
No,
it's not groundbreaking. It's not groundbreaking at all. In actual fact, I wasn't massively fond of the finished product. I didn't think I did much with it, but it went on to catch a lot of fish for a lot of people. And it's the same with the Carp Forum mix, which I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a guy who
oh fuck! We talk every now and then, just on message.
It's not Serenity.
Pete. No. He was Serenity is Alan. Oh God, my memory's shit. Serenity is he's older than the guy that did the Carp Forum. It's Peter, someone Smurf on the Carp Forum. If you look for Smurf.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, Pete. I can't remember your last name.
And I've spoken to him as well about it.
Nice guy, really nice guy.
Yeah, lovely guy. Yeah. But what he did is he put a bait up there that is simple, effective, and hundreds of people have used it to catch carp on.
Absolutely.
So you can make it as difficult, as complex as you like, can't you? But that you can't beat that. Can't beat that kind of community testing of a product to get different conditions, different situations, and that helps you refine that final 5% we talked about earlier. That gets you from an all right product to an exceptional product.
Yeah. Absolutely. Peter Smith is his name.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter, because I've used that bait and I've caught carp on it.
Yeah, BM1, I think it was called.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I said about the carp forum being a great source of information. Many years ago when I was first started really getting into it, he was posting a lot on that forum and learned a lot from him. And, he's had a lot to share on there. We're lucky to have those places. We really are. And as you say, you can go on. I don't know if it's still on there, is it? I imagine the recipe's somewhere in the carp forum.
Yeah, no, it's still there.
You can go in there, get a recipe, and you're probably fishing with a bait that's better than most of the major companies are producing. It's just a fact. It's just the way it is. Same as the bait heads group, bait buffs group on Facebook. Yeah. You can go in there. I think the recipe's there for everyone to see.
But like I say, it's a more expensive bait than the BM one because it includes milk.
Yeah.
But it's I wouldn't necessarily say it's a significantly better bait for the money. I would say it's another couple of percent in the right direction. And if you go on that journey of taking the BM1, which is that carp forum mix, which is relatively simple, I think it might be 5 ingredients or something like that. And you take that next step to using something like the bait buffs mix. I can't remember what we called it now. That bait, anyway. But the bait buffs mix, that particular one. If you question why there's 10 ingredients or something in that one, and you start to understand what these things are adding, then that is a really helpful start to building your knowledge on what is adding value to your boilie. So now I'm adding milk proteins. Why am I adding 2 different caseins? That'll send you down a little rabbit hole of learning and knowledge. Why are we including a powdered soluble fish meal? Why are we including squid meal or whatever those things are? And it's if you question and challenge and you start to get your brain under it, there's a lot there that it just progresses you to the next stage of understanding. So, not necessarily to more carp. You certainly spend more money, but you start to focus in on the things that make the difference. Yeah. Because we probably need to tie this up, mate. But there was a period there where I was making my own bait, and I just thought I'm going to spend as much money as I want to on this bait. So I thought, right, what's the maximum limit for liver powder? And this was the soluble chicken stuff from British Aquafeeds. So it's the hydrolyzed chicken liver powder, and I was going, right, I'm going to go in at 50 grams per kilo with that, and I'm going to go 50 grams of keramine as well, which was, I think, available through them at the time. I don't know if you can still get it or not. I've got enough to keep me happy for the rest of my life. But
it's hard to get now. Yeah, I think it's patchy.
Yeah, but I went in at 50 grams on both because I tank tested at that level, and the fish went absolutely potty for it. But in a real angling situation, literally, unless you were casting out a single hook bait, it was so over the top, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
In the end, I got down to, I think it was 5 grams of keramine and 15 of liver powder, or 10 of liver powder. It was that sort of level. That's optimum. So when you're going in with things like liver powder at 25 grams, and you think, I should put a bit more in, or if I just spend another 20p a kilo, I can have something that's revved up. The challenge for us as bait makers is to understand how 2 baits, 3 baits, how that extrapolates upwards, and could a fish tolerate 50 of those baits at that level? Because that's the thing that we often forget, isn't it? We focus on, I've just tasted that bait, I mean, and I taste all my baits. I'm sure you're the same, but you taste it and you go, oh, that's I've got the liver, I've got the caramine, I've got the a little bit of the cod liver oil here, I've got this, I've got that. You go, oh, that's spot on, that is. And then, but what you forget is that these fish eat bland stuff every day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Snails, leaves, weed, whatever. The cell, that's pretty bland. They're eating that stuff every day. And then you've given them this thing that's dialed up to 100.
Yeah.
Because you ate a fragment of one and it tasted great to you.
Exactly. And you're expecting them to eat tens and tens and tens of them.
Absolutely. And that was the problem I had, is that I was using it on Save, thinking this is going to be a real edge for me, because you can't fish it all the time. I was trying to keep the stock was relatively low at the time. We've restocked since, and it's a phenomenal water, and it's going to be phenomenal in the future as well. But back then, the stock was quite low, and I was thinking, well, they're only coming across me in ones and twos. I don't want much bait out there. If I put more in, the birds are going to get me. So what I want is something that's a bit like the key that we were talking about before. Something that just screams food. Trouble was, it screams food so loud that the fish probably wouldn't get within 5 foot of it. They were just sitting over the top of it, drinking the stuff in, going, "Cool, that's lovely." But I couldn't possibly get any closer to it.
Yeah.
So moderation is the challenge for a lot of bait makers, and a lot of blank nights sat behind baits that are over flavoured or over tasted, if you like.
Yeah. Can agree more, mate. It's great. We have covered a lot, and you've kind of meandered us through your time with different companies. Is there anything that you didn't touch upon that you want to, or is there anything else you want to cover on the episode?
No. I think I mean, I've listened to every one of these right from the beginning, and I preferred Posh Pete to you, Sam. To be perfectly honest, I wish you. I suggest we do a Kickstarter to get Posh Pete his own podcast. But I've listened to them all, and I think that we've had a real range. So there's people that have been on here before that I think are as modern day, as influential as people like Gary Bates, Bill Cotton. There's some really fantastic conversations. I don't profess to be anything as experienced as Jason or Dave Moore or as scientific as Steve White or any other guests. Not to single anyone out really, but I've been involved in that part of our sport for quite a long time, and I digest everything that I can get my hands on the subject still. So I love just listening to people talk about bait and their own approach to it. So hopefully someone's enjoyed at least parts of this. I'm sure some people have disagreed with chunks of it, and they'll say, no, it wasn't this, it was that, and all the rest of it. But I can only talk about what the stuff that's been through my hands, and I'm more than happy if other people have got questions, or because we've gone over quite a lot of stuff, some of it at a superficial level. If anyone's got questions, I'm happy to answer those. But it's a never-ending journey, and I would say if you're a bait maker, don't do it in isolation. Find a community, whether that's on Facebook, whether that's on the bank, or I've got a group of mates, and I'll give them a shout out now. It's Dave Gawthorne, Robin Dix, John Miller, and Kevin Willisey, and we're all in a group called the Masturbators on WhatsApp, and we are constantly running stuff by each other. There are. I mean, how long's Robin Dix been carp fishing? I mean, he caught Heather. When was that? I mean, that was 70s, early 80s. Dave Gawthorne has been doing it for the same amount of time, probably back in the late 70s. There's black and white photos of him with fish. Like these guys have been doing it for decades. There's hundreds and hundreds of years worth of experience in our little group alone. And you need to, if you're a bait maker and you enjoy the sport and you want to talk about it, find your little community, and you'll spur each other on, and you'll get that community learning in a slightly different way. And I believe you run a club as well. That again helps that. helps with that community learning. So that's probably worth a look as well.
Debate club, yeah, I need to do more with that, but yeah, absolutely, same kind of thing. It accelerates your learning, doesn't it? Being around like-minded people. Couldn't agree more. It's a good note to leave it on.
Good man.
Thank you ever so much. I enjoyed that. I'm sure other people did. At the very least, Posh Pete will certainly enjoy his little mention on here. So yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff.
No, look, mate. Thank you ever so much. I appreciate what you did with the book. I appreciate this podcast. And yeah, it's good. I'm sure a lot of people will find it very interesting. And by the way, very decent of you to say, look, reach out and give you a message if anyone has a question, because that's something I get a lot. I do a lot of middlemaning between people wanting to ask the guest questions and, not having the confidence to perhaps reach out to them directly. So yeah, good on you, mate. That's a nice little touch there.
No, not a problem. And if anybody listens to this and just thinks I'd like to use the best bait I can, I mean, I can't speak to your baits because I've not used them or seen them, but I've dealt with Kenny, and I'm sure you'd take a similar approach where the best thing to do is go and speak to this person.
Absolutely.
Have a cup of tea, go down, speak to Kenny. Kenny's a very busy man, so you have to be really careful about the timings and when you reaching out to him. He will get back to you. Just reach out to him and go and just have a cup of tea with him on a Saturday morning, and he'll just talk to you, and he'll explain to you. He'll say things like, "Where are you fishing?" And you go, "Oh right, okay, I know that lake. This one's worked really well on there, and this is the reason why it works. And there's this and there's that." And he'll tell you a lot about his products. He's not afraid. He's not going to give the recipe, but he's going to give you a big leg up in your learning by understanding a lot of that. And I'm sure you'd take a similar approach, Sam. I
agree. I think Ken is great, and if he's still doing his Saturday thing, you can go along on a Saturday, I believe, and he's there until about midday, and you can just literally just walk in the door and have a chat with him. Obviously, there'll be other people doing it as well,
yeah.
But and be respectful of him. But no, Ken's a great guy. He really is. He's passionate about his baits. He's trying to do it the right way, and he rolls a great bait. Obviously, I think mine are better, don't I? But I'm going to say that. But no, I would say use what bait you resonate with. Use who you resonate with. People might not really like me. They might not like my message. Definitely go and have a look at what Ken's doing. He's rolling a great bait. He's a great guy, and he's doing it, as far as I'm aware, for the right reasons. So yeah, no, he definitely. I've shouted him out on the podcast before. I don't know if you've heard.
Yes.
You have. I think that's probably why you're saying this, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I'm on board with him, and yeah, no, he rolls a good bait for sure. And I'll say this: he's got more baits in the range than me. I've only got one. At the time of recording, although I do have another one. Whether I'll bring it out anytime soon, I don't know, because it's just time is a nightmare. But yeah, Ken's got more to choose from for sure. So there we go. Look, Paul, thanks ever so much again, mate. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Who knows? Maybe we'll meet again on an episode and do another one in the future. But I really enjoyed it, mate, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
No problem, mate. Speak soon.